welcome to the Crafted Conversation with me, Marcus Sharrod, where we give consideration to the art of performance and development in the classroom or instructional environment on the coaching field for sports coaches, and consider a culture of performance where conversations will explore anything from instructional methods, teaching and learning, which is informed by educational and cognitive psychology, motivation theory, cognitive biases, designing programs of learning, the use of feedback and assessment, and also consider group dynamics and performance as well as individual performance. None of this can be explored without the lens of identity and storytelling and generating a sense of belonging within the cultural performance in which we exist. So, without further ado, we continue with today's crafted conversation. Welcome back to the Crafted Conversation with me, Marcus Sharrod. The Crafted Conversation being the outlet, the voice, if you like, via podcast and weekly newsletter of the Crafted Concept, where we believe that approaches towards learning, growth, development, performance are all intertwined, and the Crafted Concept is to view our professional development, what we do day to day, as a craft, and thereby a skill that requires research, honing, development, accommodating of new material, and seeking challenge. Today, I'm going to be briefly talking about my experience delivering the keynote speech at the Physical Education and Sport Conference hosted by Keynote Educational last week. So the second half of the podcast will be a live recording that was taken on the day with a Q&A of all delegates, where delegates wrote down a number of questions which were picked at random by myself and my guest of last week's show, Chris Dossett. Chris Dossett, the chair of the Professional Association of Directors of Sport in Independent Schools, PADSIS, and a former legend, really, of physical education and sport in the independent school sector. Chris and I addressed a number of issues around the subject, but also around leadership in general. That was certainly the focus of my keynote speech at the beginning of the day, and that's where I'd like to just place a small amount of focus before we skip to the live recording of that Q&A. So with the Crafted Concept, I speak regularly about the three pillars that underpin learning, for me being the learning environment, learning design, and then how we can critique that learning to support the cyclical approach to growth and development. On the day, I discussed these three things in the context of the education sector, but of course it's completely relevant to education, to elite and developmental pathway sport, or even the corporate sector. Learning environment for me, first and foremost, is about connection. It's about brain states. It's about leveraging the opportunities that we have on human instinct to support one another and to feel safe in the environment. And environment takes work. Environment takes the greatest amount of work of any, in fact. Lots can be said of culture. We hear a lot of the culture that's created in a professional environment. Certainly hear a lot, those of us that engage regularly with professional sport, reading and podcasts, etc. Hear a lot about team cultures. Ultimately, culture is, how do you measure what it is to be a part of and integrated within the environment on a day-to-day basis? Culture, environment is the mundane. It's the asking the random member of staff what the belief system is and how we value our approach to our profession. It's about integrity, it's about humility and consistency. So first and foremost, I spoke to delegates about cultivating deliberate safety in the environment. And safety doesn't mean taking people's work on for them or just being really, really nice all the time. Safety is far more intentional than that. Safety is about supporting others to speak up, to have a unique and valued voice within the context of the values of the organization, the values of the team. Individuals should feel empowered to be able to challenge, and in doing so, we expose ourselves to more lateral thought and strategic direction, more diversity via the inclusivity that we create within the environment, more diversity in our thought approaches, and just more agility and dynamism really in approaching our day-to-day goals, mid-term, long-term goals. So deliberate safety being absolutely essential. I think that can be, in terms of actions, I spoke to delegates about setting expectations, defining people's role, setting standards and then meeting them consistently, supporting contribution, actively seeking, quite deliberately seeking contribution from others, and then of course being accepting of and reactive to, proactively responsive to critique. If a team member is willing to bring something critical to the table, then they need to be seen. Whether or not that idea has to be accommodated is another story, but just allowing that person to feel seen and valued by bringing that observation to the table, regardless of whether it's taken forward or not, is supportive of a fantastic learning environment. I spoke then, and I'm going to deliver a pod on this next week actually, so rather than go into any great detail, I spent an amount of time talking about communicating the story. We are, in essence, storytelling animals. We live by and thrive within narrative. That's ancestrally where we've come from. Fireside storytelling for connection, for serotonin, for oxytocin. And setting a story allows the ability to elevate one beyond themselves and ascribe themselves to something bigger than just your individual identity. When it comes to learning design, that's all about how we set goals, co-create together as a team. I spoke about the phrase delegating. I'm not a fan of the word delegation. I feel over the years, maybe from the corporate sector, it's created a subconsciously negative connotation around the word delegate. Delegate to me feels like I'm giving you a job that I don't value, you do it for me. Now, that's not to say that that is what delegation means, and listeners may sort of challenge me on that, but I prefer the word devolved. Devolve responsibility, in my eyes, is more about supporting agency and recognizing the competence of your team members within the learning design environment. And that responsibility, usually human instinct tells us that we thrive within it. And the next area of learning design, and again, something worthy of 10 episodes, is curriculum design. What is it that we seek to achieve? What is, in Ofsted parlance, which I unapologetically use actually, despite people's general feelings towards the inspectorate, what is the intent? What is the learning intent of this department, of this team during this particular performance cycle? Whatever that defined cycle would be within the elite sport environment, within this quarter in the corporate environment. What is the intent? And then if we know what the intent is by starting at the end, then how can we implement that? What steps do we need to put into place? What measures, what assessment measures and steps, goals within that defined period will allow us to work towards that intention? And that leads nicely into learning critique. Regular review of strategic direction, taking lateral views, alternate approaches, viewing different landscapes, trying to imagine different choices that could be made by the team, different futures, to then give the most objective and informed view of where we're going and what it is that we're doing. I use the word organic, and that is exactly what learning critique should be. It shouldn't be defined at all times in the most traditional sense. What are the different ways? Who's the different viewpoints? What are the different statistical measures we can take in order to define our direction? I went on to talk about what I defined as an ABC model of outstanding leadership, which is completely applicable to any area, be it education, elite sport, corporate, whoever. For me, ABC, there are two A's, in fact: authenticity, autonomy, and then a sense of belonging, and finally compassion, the AABCs of outstanding leadership. And I'll just dive into each one of those four categories now. Authenticity is about you presenting your unique self, because we all bring our own personal stories, our own life worlds, our narrative experiences, our lessons learned, our mistakes made, the character that defines you as a human being, as a unique, standalone human being. And presenting that uniqueness creates an authenticity which hopefully should always breed trust within the team. If you are unapologetically yourself within a professional environment, then at least people know what to expect from you. That consistency breeds safety. We've already spoken about safety within the learning environment. However, that uniqueness needs to be adaptive. There's got to be a malleability in your approach which demonstrates the fact that you can listen, you can observe, and you can act on mistakes or act on feedback. It doesn't always have to be mistakes. It could just be feedback that requires some sort of address. From an expertise point of view, authenticity as a professional is supported by your expertise. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be the number one expert in all aspects of what you deliver. You will have better performance analysts. You, as an elite sports coach, you may even have an on-the-grass coach who day to day has a greater variety and greater skill set in delivering training sessions. And that's fine, because your skill set, your expertise is to be a leader. Leaders should demonstrate vulnerability, and vulnerability should support our continued growth. If we're not ever learners, then we're not demonstrating to the community that we support, to the team that we spearhead, that to be an expert requires constant review. And finally, passion. If you don't hold a passion for what you do, if you cannot energize a room and stand in front of someone for 1 to 2 minutes and just tell them why you love what it is that you do, why you love teaching, why you love coaching, then that authenticity in being the leader of that team in that area is probably not going to shine through. And actually, expertise and passion go hand in hand. By continuing to seek professional learnings, then of course you're going to remain passionate about applying new cognitive science theories into your day-to-day, considering retrieval practice and thinking, how can I accommodate this fantastic, well-supported, research-led example of teaching and learning in my classroom? How can I not allow it to attack and challenge my identity, but in fact accommodate it and make subtle tweaks to my delivery in a way that I can continue to passionately deliver my subject and support the development of young people? Autonomy is about empowering the team. I've spoken about devolved responsibility. We want to be celebrating of and create opportunities to develop competence within the team. You are here because your skill set is valued, and here are the ways in which your unique skill set can benefit this entire team. Devolve responsibility, have something to be accountable to, hold something higher than yourself for the benefit of the team, for the benefit of the community, and off you go and do it, and I trust you. And that feeds into the sense of belonging as well as the B within my double ABC model. Belonging is about being able to contribute, having an understanding of what the story of this organization, of this team, of the direction is. Where are we going, and why are we going in that direction? And why do we hold these values? Having that extra sense of narrative, of something bigger than us that tells the story, is incredibly powerful to create intrinsic motivation. So not the extrinsic, get to the paycheck, possible bonus, the win at the weekend, the exam outcome, those things over time will dwindle. This is about intrinsically motivating the team. How can you contribute to this environment? In what ways are your actions feeding and developing the story that we want to tell? And a lot can be said these days for leadership of the compassionate variety. Gone are the days of the standalone leader, manager who is acting on a higher level than those below them. A uniquely British class-based system, if you like, of leadership, where post-industrial revolution, we have those that are factory managers and those who are beneath them, both socially and literally on the factory floor, performing the manual work. Those days, society is far more stratified and malleable, and therefore we need as leaders to recognize that and not fall back on stereotype and traditional notions of leadership. Leadership is about being conscious. It's about being aware. It's about taking the temperature, making the observations that support the day-to-day performance of your team. It's about compassionately approaching team members with a curiosity. What is it that you love about your job? How can we better support you as a unique individual? And that might go further to spend an amount of time, dare I even say money or budget, on doing some personality profiling. Find out from an objective sense where team members sit on the spectrum of personality. There are so many great tools out there these days, whether you're paying very good money for something like Spotlight or for free completing a 16 personalities survey online. Being curious about the team, about what motivates them, what's going on in their personal lives, if indeed they're open to share that with you. And that takes time, and that takes relationship development on a professional sense first and foremost. Being curious does not necessarily mean diving into someone's personal circumstances. First of all, it's about, how am I professionally curious about you? How can I demonstrate that I want to support you to be better? A lot can be said for empathy and values. Do you offer a valued sense of self in your day-to-day presentation as a leader? And providing that empathy, supporting just the amount of flex required that someone feels seen and supported as an individual can go such a long way to supporting your authenticity, but motivating them again from an intrinsic point of view. Whether it's some flex around school drop-off times for parents, whether it's flex around working situations, whether someone's required in the office in the corporate world versus a couple of days at home, that just provide that greater amount of flex and less travel time. Whether it's flex around supporting team members who have a particular number of additional sets in year 10 during a reporting cycle, whatever it is that shows that you are value driven and empathic, but not to the point that you are becoming sympathetic and thereby taking away someone's sense of agency, just doing their work for them. And so summarizes my keynote presentation on outstanding leadership to delegates at the Physical Education and Sport Conference hosted by Keynote Educational last week. As stated at the beginning of the pod, I'm going to switch over now to a live recording on the day of myself and Chris Dossett answering questions that were put to us by delegates in a 15-minute Q&A session. The first of which questions comes from a delegate on the day who wanted to discuss having members of the team, members of the department who had other roles and responsibilities, leadership roles within the school, be that a pastoral role, perhaps head of year, or indeed an assistant headship, deputy headship. So we pick up at that point. Please do feel free to get in touch. I'm Marcus at thecraftedconcept.co.uk. You can find me on LinkedIn, Marcus Sharrod.
Staff are either heads of year or SLT their focus back in
Yeah.
to the PE stuff, especially when it's deadlines and when it's the stuff that they don't prioritise, like the marking or the assessments or especially because when they're heads of year particularly, and my SLT, he's the head of he's our head safeguarding lead. Things come up on the dot and they have to.
Yeah, the goalpost
How can I work? How can I help them to pull it back when they need to try and prioritise?
Okay, well that's the first question you ask them. How can I help you?
Yeah.
As a lead, how can I help you be better? Okay, so what do you need from me? So straight away, you're putting the emphasis on you. You're being vulnerable. You are, you're creating a safer environment. But then you have to have some agreed success criteria. Agreed being so you've got to do your assessments by, when are we going to agree they're done by? If the deadline's Friday, would it be better to do it by Thursday? What can I do to help you? And as Marcus said, if that means I take your P lesson this afternoon, or I do your games lesson, I'll give you games off this afternoon, then let's do that. But I think, the key is the communication before it happens, not after. And, that for me is a key question. What can I do to help you? And if you've agreed it, then normally most people don't want to break an agreement or a contract. Normally. But, people are busy, and we all need a little bit of understanding and slack sometimes, as long as they don't take the mickey. Okay.
I think that one's really tough. I think particularly those colleagues in the maintain sector, those kind of head of year and leadership roles from a pastoral perspective, they tend to gravitate towards those roles. I think Dos has alluded to it there in his presentation. The skill set that we have, having presumably accessed some level of performance sport in our lives, and then just the type of people we are as PE teachers, we tend to move towards those roles quite quickly. And therefore, as a head of department, you're having to manage those kind of conflicting roles that people have. But what I'd always come back to, as well as the contracted agreement and seeing them for what they are and trying to be authentic in that leadership, is you started off as a PE teacher. That's what you must have a passion and a value system around what it is to deliver excellent physical education. And so if we can somehow come back to that and revisit that and ask ourselves an honest or difficult question, are pupils accessing PE the way that we believe they should currently, then hopefully that might at least be a start point. How are we looking questions?
There's some brilliant questions here. I love this.
Right, okay.
So the first one was, how do you teach support enable young students to articulate their thoughts when you employ the pupil first, pupil last approach? Okay, so as I say, the first couple of times you do it, there will be a lot of embarrassing silences. And normally you might need a cultural architect, someone that you speak to beforehand that will go for you to say, look, I can imagine my last pupil, Ali Khalil, I said, Ali, look, if it just say something there, and sooner or later they get it. And I knew that I'd got it at my last school, but in week 3, somebody spoke over somebody else, and Ali said, shh, John speaking. And I thought, we've got it now. Okay. And I can remember vividly doing it, and some of the staff looking at me thinking, this guy's crazy. No one's saying anything. But you just got to stick with it. You've got to maybe, as I say, prompt a few people to help you out. But normally, once they start going, you can't shut them up. And then you have to make sure that they keep going back to the success criteria. So just trust the process. It will work. Don't give up after 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, and much as we would in a classroom, if you're following that sort of quality first teaching approach, or anyone that's engaged, interested by the kind of your Rosenshine principles or whatever, then we've got a model and we've got a scaffold. So it might be a case that you have to give a few prompt cards, or even model what good interaction looks like from a people first, people last perspective. And then that soon inspires, as Chris said, along with the confidence to do so, the ability to articulate what they're really thinking. But it's worth noting, you can't articulate what you think unless you have the requisite knowledge to know what's going on. So if you've got a bunch of children who aren't really basketballers, but you're doing some really fun basketball in PE, you should probably be mindful of that, because even most of us, dare I say, probably don't have the requisite knowledge to give really effective basketball feedback beyond, the basics. That is worthwhile. I would say be mindful of the environment in which you go for that pupil first, pupil last, because you can't articulate feedback and be critical unless you have a knowledge base.
Okay, yeah, love this one. How much do you place on winning? Success brings success. How can you inspire more to play if there is a winning mentality? I would place very little value on winning. And as I say, if you set performance goals and process goals, you will win more. And if you speak to any elite athlete, they are driven by process goals. Okay, they are driven by a mastery of learning, of getting better. And if you've got a winning mentality, or you just want to win all the time, in Steve Beater's book, he says, imagine you're 100 years old and your great-great-grandchild says to you, what should I do with my life? Now, you're not going to say, win the under-15 Borough Cup. Okay? You're not going to say, buy a Ferrari or own a massive house. Okay? So once it goes back to values and identity, genuinely, what do you want to get out of life? And you'll say things like, make sure you're happy, do what you want to do, don't listen to other people, trust yourself, all those sorts of things. Okay. So I think that's a really good question to ask people. And also in Cass' book, she says, when Andre Agassi won Wimbledon, he said he woke up the next morning as if he'd been let into a dirty little secret, because nothing had changed. He wasn't any happier. He still had to wash his socks, he said, the next day. And so so Cass' story is she went to the Olympics in 96 and came 7th. She went to the Olympics in 2000 and came 9th and felt she was a failure. Now, let's put our hand up here if we wouldn't mind even going to the Olympics, let alone finishing 9th. Thank you very much. Okay, so she gave up rowing. And then she started doing some ergo training. She realised that, she actually loved rowing. And I think that's really important here. We're going to talk about compassionate leadership. And let's face it, we start playing sport because we love sport. We love our teammates. Hopefully we love ourselves. And you know what? Loving your opposition is not a bad thing. You look at Nadal and Federer. When Federer retired, Nadal was in tears. Look at Alex G and Caden Wild this year in the triathlon, when Alex G overtook. Hayden Wild was the one at the end with his arm round Alex G, or I'll show it later when Simone Biles was bowing down to Rebecca Andrade. You can love the people you play against, because actually that's what drives you on. Nadal's not going to be as good without Federer. Djokovic is not as good without Nadal, etc., etc. So you need competitors. So I think it really is. What is it that's so winning's gone? You've won today, that feeling's there, and then it needs to be some sort of higher purpose. And if you can articulate that to children about, mastery learning, the joy of, making somebody on your team feel better. That's normally the best player, isn't it? That, wants to win everything. What about if you make little Johnny a little bit better? Mate, what about if Johnny says something in the halftime team talk because you've bigged him up? Or, Johnny did a good pass and you run over the pitch and give him a fist pump. How much better is that going to make you feel? And we all know that one of the best ways we can make ourselves feel better is to make other people feel better. So make other people feel better. So winning, it'll look after itself.
Winning from a scoreboard perspective, don't care really at all. Winning, you've got to define winning in a different way. Make it character-led, like Dos said. Make it, the win is in the feedback and what we do differently.
I think this one's really good, because this goes on to, what is the best way to prove success to SLT when grades still come at the benchmark thrown at them? Okay, I'm not sure if I said it in this one or I've got in the girls one. I was on a talk at Loughborough Union the other day with some recruiters, and these are their words. Employers are looking for a type of person. They are agnostic to your exam grades and what degree you've got. Okay, sport teaches you those things. And the more we start teaching and valuing those benefits of, let's say I said to you, your child's going to leave school, they're going to be a great team player, they're going to have some leadership skills, they're going to be resilient, they're going to have courage, they're going to be creative, they're going to be persistent, they're going to be kind, they're going to be compassionate. When you're 30, that's what an employer is going to employ you for. When you're 21, maybe they'll employ you because of your degree. But if you want to progress as a human, they are characteristics that you need, and this is what sport is teaching you. And if you get a B in GCSE, PE or an A, it is not the end of the world. Okay, so maybe you need to go back to your SLT and agree that possibly GCSE is one of the success criteria, if you think of that that pie chart that we put up there, but there are lots of others as well. And unfortunately for us, many of them are intangible. So if I came to your lesson, I said to you, I'm going to measure the success of your lesson today by how many children smile.
And to finish on that, I think, yeah, of course, we can't hide from the fact that the main metric that we are held to is the grade point average, the outcome at GCSE, at A-level, the passes at BTEC, etc. That's a reality of the education system in this country, indeed in the Western world. So we can't change that. Therefore, rather than just try and eradicate that goalpost, that can be one of them. But let's actually, as a department, explore how we can develop things that we feel more passionately about developing human beings through physical education in and out of the classroom. And funnily enough, you'll probably find that through excellent teaching and learning practice in the classroom, that it has parity and is unified and agreed by everybody, backed by a decent level of robust assessment and tracking, having a really secure physical education curriculum that maps against and benefits that, you're probably operating in certainly the top 10% of departments. Therefore, you're going to have more consistent practical outcomes, which is worth 30% at GCSE. If you're delivering the NEA in a positive manner, then you're probably going to be adding value versus the vast majority of schools in the other 10%. And if your teaching and learning practice is consistent across all members of the department and kind of research-led and developed from a curriculum perspective, little things like as easy as at the start of GCSE, chapter 1 in the textbook is anatomy and physiology. And therefore, ostensibly as a result of that, I'm delivering planes, axes and levers by November. What a bad decision that is, in my opinion. Why would you deliver the most difficult content on the spec in term 1, year 10? Stuff like that. As simple as just doing things that you can have control over as a department and being aware of will probably push your results anyway, while you're still driving that character piece and still working on developing good human beings. We better draw to a close there, I think, Steve.
One more question.
Go on in, go for it.
Okay. What do you do to tie in other departments and ensure that your culture beliefs regarding PE and sport are shared and agreed across colleagues, across the common room?
You speak to whoever's in charge of your inset and you say, in September, I want to do a talk to the whole common room. Okay. And you share with them your beliefs, your values, and what you are measuring success by. So if you're a year 9 tutor and your netballer comes in for the weekend, the first question you ask her is not, did you win? Okay. If you say to her, look, you're intelligent people, you're degree educated people, can you think of a better question to ask them? And if they know, for instance, that the purpose of your program is fun and enjoyable, first question is, do you enjoy the game of the weekend? So that'd be the first thing. I'd also do assemblies. I would do assemblies to every single year group. And again, I would make sure that you are just drip, 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 drip. Once you've decided your purpose and it is absolutely clear what that is, when you're speaking to parents on the touchline, when you're speaking to your head even if it's in the corridor, if you're a head of department, you should be meeting your head, I would say, at least once every half term. Okay. Most heads and most SLT are not trained sports people. And again, as I said earlier, for a lot of them, they didn't have a positive experience of sport at school. So it's up to you to educate them. Okay. So if you get up and stand in front of the whole school and give something like that as an assembly, or on your inset day in September, you're doing that as well, but it can't end there. You've got to just keep, if you write out an end of week email, if you're putting stuff on social media, these are the things you're celebrating. You're celebrating optimism, tenacity, enthusiasm, compassion. You never, or I would never, ever, ever put a result on social media. Okay? Because again, what's that? And I was at a school the other day, we were walking down the corridor, I was being shown around by the headmaster, maths teacher comes out, oh, this is Greg, he takes the under 14, 18, blah, blah. Did you win at the weekend, Greg? Blah, 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 blah. Walked down the corridor, said to the head, why did you ask him that? Do you understand that you've just made that teacher think that winning is the most important thing? And he didn't mean to, that wasn't his intent, but you have to be intentional in these things. I had a headmaster once say, I saw my first game of, this is a new head, saw my first game of the year at the weekend. Boys were playing hockey against X. It was good to send them down the motorway with a bloody nose. And the good thing was that day, the number of teachers that came up to me, physics teachers, maths teachers, saying, that's not what we're trying to do here, is it? Which is really good. So my message was going through. So then it's up to me to go and speak to the head. And he thought he was doing the right thing. He wasn't, but he'd come from a non-sporty school and he wasn't sporty himself, because if you read the back page of the Daily Mail, that's what you should be saying. But we haven't got the under-13 World Cup. We're coaching children. And so then his language changed a lot in assemblies. And of course, that was good.
I think Chris alluded to it in his presentation, and it's something that we're all aware of. And we shouldn't just assume that our colleagues are, just because we're fluent in the language of regular physical exercise and all the benefits that it brings to us cognitively, physically, emotionally, whatever, that our colleagues are aware of that, and actually standing up in front of, on an inset day, all of your colleagues and saying, these are the ways in which we're building curriculum around our department that are going to benefit the children in your physics lab, in your maths classroom, in your history class, because they are energized, they're experiencing failure, they're developing their resilience. And who wouldn't go for that? If you felt more informed in that regard, why wouldn't your colleagues be supportive? And the other point to make, I suppose, on the co-curricular or those in school, day schools, and I live in a very specific boarding world. Sorry, everyone pretty much apart from me and perhaps one other in here, they go and play their club sport at the weekend, don't they? What about how easy and quick would it be to have a laminated little card that teachers could have in their classroom or on their desk with just some great questions? What was your best failure this weekend? What did you learn about yourself this weekend playing your sport? How are your team going to progress next week? Those types of things, rather than did you win? Did you score? Did you smash anyone? No.
I'll just finish on that and say, I think with the exam success or exam grades, what it breeds in a lot of classes is, whether it's physics, maths or whatever, I want to beat you.
Mm.
And when the grades are read out, as long as I got a higher score than you, that's not healthy. Imagine if we had a physics class when I'm helping you to get a better grade, because if I help you get a better grade, that's going to help me get a better grade. And again, in Kath Bishop's book, she says that the word competition comes from the Latin compiter. Com means together and pater means to strive for. So competition actually means to strive together. And we've got away from that, because competition means now, not only am I going to beat you, I'm going to rub your nose in it and I'm going to post it all over social media. That is not healthy. Whereas imagine in our classes, if everyone in the class was trying to help his or her classmates get better.
Mm.
Rather than, I'm not helping you because that means you might beat me and I don't like that. I'm going to win if I help you, I'm going to win, because explaining it to you how it works is going to make me better, and it's going to be reciprocated to me. So that idea of competition and collaborative competition, and, if you like, meaningful victories, not just a hollow victory that just because you've won, but you've, maybe crossed the line or whatever. But yeah, I think that's really important, that competition actually means strive together, not against.
To round off, I think strive together. That is a lovely way to close both of our presentations from both a pupil and a colleague to colleague perspective, because to me, striving together sounds like embracing difficulty. It sounds like being challenged. It sounds like connection, which sounds like serotonin and oxytocin and dopamine in its longer form sense rather than its scrolling sense. And all of that sounds like human instinct. Thanks, everyone.
Cool.
As ever, feel free to shout me up. My socials are linked into the show notes at the bottom. You can find me on LinkedIn as Marcus Sharrod. You can find me on Instagram at The Crafted Concept, or just drop me an email straight in, marcus@thecraftedconcept.co.uk. Would love to hear about how I might be able to support your performance environment. Until next time.